Forcing a compromised Jayden Daniels to play this Sunday would definitely be a mistake, especially when Marcus Mariota doesn't present a downgrade, but rather a different proposition for the Las Vegas Raiders defense to handle. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, and I'm right here with you 5 days a week. You can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can follow me on X at DHarrison82 if you'd like. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or your first view. And for all of the everydayers out there, those of you who come through for every single episode, thank you especially for doing so. And thank you especially for doing so again today. If it's your first time coming through, thanks for finding the show. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully you come back again real soon. On today's episode, I'm going to tell you why one listener can't get Carrie Underwood to return his calls. We're going to expose the Raiders' most exploitable flaws. But first, we're going to detail how the Commanders can win this Sunday with or without Jayden Daniels. All that is coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's brought to you by Mazda. Like the players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Like I said, forcing a physically compromised Jayden Daniels to play this Sunday would be a mistake, in my opinion, especially when Marcus Mariota presents not a downgrade, but just a different challenge for the Raiders defense to face. We're going to open up this mailbag episode right away with Jayden Daniels and the viability of Marcus Mariota as a starter, because that, of course, is going to be the top topic as we get into this week. Wednesday's practice coming up here in a little over 15 hours or so from the time that I'm recording this. This is a combined question out of the mailbag from Ravi and David. Ravi asks, given the knee sprain for Jayden Daniels, would I sit him on Sunday to heal for the Falcons game coming up in week 4? David also wants to know if Jayden will play and if Chris Rodriguez Jr. Will be kept active on the game day roster. So Chris Rodriguez Jr., part of the active roster, 53-man roster, but has not been part of the active 48-man roster that the NFL is allowed to have every game day. I don't know why they make this whole thing convoluted, honestly, with the extra regular season game and all that stuff and just the rate that injuries happen. Anyway, I think they should allow every NFL team to go up to a 60-man roster and, I don't know, have all 60 men available for the game. Or can we really have too many players available? Is that really a thing? Is that really a problem that we're concerned about in the NFL? I know it's a money thing, but I think everybody's making enough money here, guys. Anyway, conversation for a different day. So this is the number one question facing the team this week, right? And Dan Quinn, fortunately, has been very clear about Jayden's injury, just like he's been very clear about everybody else's injury. And he says that Jayden is, quote unquote, truly day-to-day, end quote. And I believe him, right? He says that he did have the MRI on his knee over the weekend, sustained an injury on the hit where, if you remember, Jayden is running away from Micah Parsons, kind of looking back at Micah Parsons, and then turns back around just in time to see, I think it was a DB coming forward, or else it would have been a much worse hit on Jayden if he wasn't looking that direction. Probably would have been a fumble. I was up in the press box kind of like bracing for him, and I mean, if I could have yelled loud enough to tell him to turn around, I would have told him, but fortunately, he at least turned around enough to not take a massive hit, but unfortunately did take a hit to the knee. And that is where Dan Quinn says he suffered the knee injury. At first, there were some other plays as well later on that kind of helped, exacerbate it or make it worse or whatever. Dan Quinn also did say that Jayden Daniels has begun his return to play process, part of his rehabilitation process. And that's not just about feeling good. It's a strenuous multi-step process, which I think is important to remember. And there's specific markers. There's strength tests, change of direction, pivoting, stopping, and then hitting certain speeds before they'll even let him back on the practice field to get some of those reps. So that's all incredibly important. I think it's a little bit different than the rib injury he was dealing with last year. Like the rib injury by itself doesn't necessarily physically limit you. Like it's uncomfortable, it hurts, and that can physically limit you, right? But if you can perform and play past the pain, then it's kind of, becomes a mind over matter type of deal. And as long as there's no risk to, further injure the area. The knee, like when your knee is banged up or sprained like it is here, there's just things that it does to you physically that you can't just mentally overcome and say, no, I'm tougher than a sprained knee. Like that's just not a thing. So, depending on how bad it is, of course. So we'll see what happens. DQ did say he'll have more to share Wednesday, obviously, but the team isn't going to miss any steps. He emphasized how important Jayden is to the team, not just as a quarterback, but as an individual. My read on it is that they're going to be cautious. They're going to take the same approach they take with every other injury. Fans have all seen what happened with Robert Griffin III back in 2012. I chronicled why that's not the same situation that it is here on yesterday's episode. I get the PTSD. I get the connection 100%, but I think this franchise much better at managing players and player injuries than that version of this franchise was. If he can't go, though, DQ did say that the confidence in Marcus Mariota is quote unquote through the roof. Mariota, back from his own injury that he experienced in the preseason, looks healthy, feels healthy. DQ said they're going to take it all the way to Friday before they make that decision. I would anticipate, so usually Wednesdays we hear from Jayden Daniels as a post-practice press conference. I would anticipate hearing from Marcus Mariota instead of Jayden Daniels on Wednesday, just as they go through this. But we'll see. Could be wrong on that, so we'll see how it goes. To David's second point with Austin Eckler out for the year, yes, you should absolutely expect to see Chris Rodriguez Jr. active on game day for the first time in week 3. Dan Quinn didn't really say that specifically, but highly alluded to Chris Rodriguez getting into the fold. Like, that's the words he uses, getting into the fold, getting back into the fold. So, yeah, I would expect C-Rod to be available on Sunday for the Washington Commanders. Question from Dr. Wonderful. How do the Commanders win this game if Marcus Mariota is the starter? What's the game plan? And again, we talked about this a little bit on yesterday's episode, but not everybody comes through for every episode. And if you're an everydayer, we're just going to re-hit some things and maybe some new things as we continue to study this game. Trust me, I've watched a lot of Raiders football on Tuesday, watched a lot of Marcus Mariota football the last couple of days. So some of this might be a little bit different. The offense does change, right? But not a whole lot, not dramatically, right? He's not a downgrade to me. It's a different type of player. Like I said, if this were a 3-week thing or a season-long thing, which knock on wood that it's not already and doesn't become that, then it's a little bit of a different conversation. But for a 1-week standpoint, honestly, the contingency plans are already going to be in place. Fortunately, I've already asked Dan Quinn these questions at pre-game press conferences, not specifically about Jayden, but just in general about players missing, especially when they're really impactful players. And he kind of outlined the contingency plan, need, and operation, and all that stuff, which makes a lot of sense. I think that the offense becomes a traditional pocket passing type of offense more so than anything else, or more than it is now anyway, I should say. Marcus is obviously a more developed pocket passer. He's done it a lot more. He's more comfortable attacking downfield from the pocket, not necessarily bailing as quickly as a young quarterback will. And I think this is probably going to be the biggest difference that you see between the Marcus Mariota, Jayden Daniels offense. Not that Marcus isn't going to escape the pocket, just like he might not be as quick to do it. The run game, I think, is going to shift a little bit. I think with Daniels, there's more of a run focus for the quarterback, read options, more designed runs. I don't think you're going to not get designed runs or read options with Marcus, but I think you'll get less. I should put it that way. Things like that. And you're going to get more traditional runs, which I think could actually benefit the offensive line because not to get too deep into the weeds on it, but on a read option, the offensive line makes their initial block and they basically have to react to the defense because they don't know who has the ball once the decision's been made at the mesh point, right? If the running back keeps the ball, that's kind of a straight up play. If the quarterback keeps the ball, then you've got to kind of adjust, and you can't do that until you see what the defense is doing or if they have some sort of call or signal or whatever it is at the time. A straight up run play, if you know we're in shotgun, the ball's going to go to the running back, we're going to run through the A gap. Boom, I know my assignment. I know my first assignment. I know my second assignment. It's just a simpler type of play to block up for the offensive line and potentially gives them the opportunity to be a little bit more physical and dominant. So again, I think Marcus's mobility will still be featured, to a certain extent, just not as much as Jayden's obviously is. So I think the game plan, either way, establish the run on the perimeter. The Raiders are really vulnerable there right now, allowing 7.55 yards per carry on outside runs. Then use hard play actions to attack the deep left side of their defense, which is an area where they've shown coverage weaknesses as well. So knowing who is going to be behind center for Washington is only half the battle, and we'll get there by the end of the week, hopefully. Beating the Raiders, though, is going to require exploiting their very specific and, to me, very glaring weaknesses. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. And I think this week, the moment that moved the game forward, to me, with context, has to be head coach Dan Quinn's leadership following the injury to quarterback Jayden Daniels. Instead of relying on the old cliche, next man up, Quinn showed true forward thinking by first acknowledging the immense impact of injured players on his team, specifically Austin Eckler, Dietrich Wise Jr., but also then talking about the Jayden Daniels injury, laying out the detailed, responsible return to play process. That deliberate approach to managing Jayden Daniels not only protects the player, protects the franchise, but also hopefully helps put the mind at ease a little bit of the fan base who knows all too well what can happen when a franchise quarterback is allowed to rush back to play. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. The NFL season is back, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans, hearing them cheer on their favorite team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle sometimes between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It can be incredibly frustrating. That's why whenever I need to go to an event or go to a show, I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fan. Game Time is easy, it's fast, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee that promises you will always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. With all the drama around who's starting at quarterback for the Commanders this week, you have to be at Northwest Stadium to feel the energy whenever that decision is made. I just pulled up the Game Time app and saw amazing last-minute deals for this weekend's game against the Raiders. The app makes it super easy. You can even see the view from your seat before you buy it, and you have to love those zone deals. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Diving back into your questions here on a mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders, it's clear that the Raiders present a classic trap game scenario with a dominant defense masking a deeply flawed and undisciplined offense. This is a game that a lot of people circled on the schedule already. Raiders won 4 games last year. You got to win this game, even with Pete Carroll, even with Geno Smith, even with the better Raiders team. If you're a true Super Bowl champion, contender, or playoff contender, you should be able to beat this Raiders team. I certainly think the Commanders can beat this Raiders team. They're still favored, even with the injury news surrounding Jayden Daniels. Now, obviously, that line is moving a little bit on FanDuel, but still favored, right? So let's get to Timothy. Insider Timothy says, what are the biggest strengths and weaknesses for the Raiders right now? And I love this question. We're going to dive more into the Raiders starting tomorrow. Our next episode will be our crossover Thursday. Your boy Q, my boy Q, your boy Q from Locked On Raiders. He will be here to tell us a lot about the Raiders, obviously, but there's no reason we can't get started a little bit right now. So from what I've seen and what I'm interested, I want to put this on record because then we'll find out how much Q agrees with me or disagrees with me from the local expert that he is out there in Vegas. To me, the run defense so far has been the anchor of the team. We're only two games in, right? So it's hard to say anything is really the true anchor of a team. But 2 games in, it looks like this run defense is really the anchor of the team. It's one of the best in the league so far. It ranks 4th in rushing yards allowed per game, but also per attempt. And that per attempt is important because, all right, well, if teams are just throwing the ball all over the yard, your ranking per game might be really good, but that rushing yards per attempt, 3.2 yards per attempt allowed, is 4th best in the NFL through 2 weeks. They're absolutely dominant against interior runs, specifically aimed at the guards. So if you're the Washington Commanders, kick it out to the tackles just a little bit. You got to keep them honest. You got to run inside too, but kick it out towards the tackles, right? They generate consistent pressure with their front 4. Don't need a blitz a whole lot. They've tallied 6 sacks in 2 games. Defensive lineman Jaleel Laulu has a team high 3 sacks. So he's kind of been a pleasant surprise for them this year. Their kicker, Daniel Carlson, is a legitimate weapon, converted 5 of 6 field goal attempts so far this year, including 2 from over 50 yards. So some good distance. I know you're jealous, Commanders fans. So am I. Weaknesses of the Raiders. The offense under Chip Kelly is incredibly inconsistent, and it starts with quarterback Geno Smith. Against the Patriots, had a 126.7 passer rating. Against the Chargers, plummeted to 37. Very hot and cold in these first 2 games. 3 interceptions against the Chargers. 2 of those interceptions were in the red zone, including 1 at the 2-yard line. Now, I know one of those interceptions is like, whatever, it's 3rd and long, throw is basically a punt, got it, whatever. But the tendency here for Geno so far this season has been to put the ball in risk. He'll throw it into coverage. You say he trusts his guys, whatever you want to say about it, but he will put the ball into jeopardy. So the Washington Commanders are going to have an opportunity to get some takeaways there because of it. The Raiders' rushing attack has been a significant liability so far this season, ranking 31st in the NFL in yards per game. They're completely ineffective running up the middle. They're averaging negative 0.42 yards per carry through the middle of their offensive line. Yikes. That's gross. Discipline has been a major issue. They've struggled with penalties, especially on the offensive line, which is 4 offensive holding penalties already. So to me, I want to send some blitzes there. Like, these guys are holding. I want to put pressure on them, man, and get those holding penalties, right? While the run defense has been strong up the middle, there is some vulnerability to running towards the edges, which we talked about earlier in this episode as well. So that's kind of a quick rundown. Again, we'll get deeper with your boy Q from Locked On Raiders on Thursday's episode. And then I've got my final episode before the weekend. And then I'll be dropping my game plan for the Washington Commanders to defeat the Las Vegas Raiders Saturday morning. So a lot of in-depth stuff coming down the pike. Are just getting started on the homework, believe me. Question next from Jay, Insider Jay. Do Dan Quinn's defenses perform worse against coaches from the Shanahan coaching tree like Matt LaFleur? Obviously, this is, somewhat of a Packers question, but Raiders offensive coordinator Chip Kelly does not come from that tree, runs a different system, but we can still kind of look at it. I would say this first, right? I know Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers, when we did the crossover, dropped a whole lot of numbers about like Matt LaFleur offenses, the Shanahan tree offense. Like, this is what it does against the Dan Quinn defense. Look, those offenses are good against a lot of people's defenses. Okay. When you put it in a vacuum or you put it in a bottle and you say, look, this is what it does against the Dan Quinn defense. It's like, oh man, Dan Quinn can't figure out this defense. These offenses. These offenses are successful against a lot of defensive coordinators. All right. There's a reason. And there's a reason that it's really successful against a defense like Dan Quinn's or Joe Witt Jr.'s in this case. It's because they're aggressive. They like to play man. They like to play, zone. They like to run behind zone blitzes. They like to do a lot of this stuff. And these offenses operate. They have a lot of things. They do a lot of flood concepts. They do a lot of things, misdirections, yada, yada, to try to challenge the discipline of the defense and challenge the play IQ of the defense that they're facing, because they understand when you have a defense, it's basically 11 men on the same page. You get one guy off that page. If you have a quarterback that is smart enough, one, to see it, if you have a quarterback that also has enough protection then to take advantage of it, you can do a lot of damage. That's why quarterbacks that aren't necessarily always the most gifted athletically, guys like Brock Purdy, for example, super smart, sees the field really well, is cool under pressure, high IQ. He can see those mismatches as they come. That's why they have that type of experience. So yes, Dan Quinn, does he have a history of not doing as well against offenses like this? Yeah, but so does everybody. These are incredibly successful offenses. I wouldn't pin that against Dan Quinn. I know that's how it got shaped here on the show, and I know that's how people will shape it. But again, these are not. It's not like we're talking about the Cleveland Browns offense that just does trash all season. But then the one time they play the Commanders, they ball out. That was the New York Giants and Daniel Jones. That's a totally different story. But these offenses, no, they're good against everybody. So yes, they do well against DQ, but they do well against a lot of people. So I wouldn't read too much into that. However, Dan Quinn did admit he was disappointed, quote, more disappointed on the play pass side of things. They were able to hit some shots down the field to the tight ends, end quote. I would say this too, looking back at the tape, I don't want to get too much into the Packers game, but looking back to the tape, man, a lot of those plays, the defensive call is in the right place. I know I went, we develop different ideas as we go through and watch, right? As I watch tape, things develop a little bit. The more I watched, the more I went back, the more you think about, okay, what are these checks? What should happen in these checks? And you only know so much, right? I'm not in the play caller's head. But the more you look at it, there's little shifts, there's little ideas here that pop up off the screen. They're like, you know what? Nah, maybe this guy that I said, in this one episode wasn't, at fault. Maybe he actually was at fault. And really, if that person does the right thing versus what they did on the play, then the play actually goes fairly well. And then the scheme isn't necessarily to blame. It's the execution. I'll tell you right now, 9 times out of 10, it's the execution, not the scheme. Although there are certainly moments where the scheme, and I will stand by the fact that I think Cliff Kingsbury, way too conservative against the Packers, did not go away from being way too conservative soon enough for my liking. So for what that's worth. It's relevant this week, though, because the Raiders, despite their own offensive struggles, despite the fact they don't come from the LaFleur, Shanahan, type of tree, they do have a primary weapon in tight end Brock Bowers. And I know because he's on my fantasy team. Their most explosive play this season was a 38-yard pass. That was a play action pass to Bowers where he beat a safety on a deep over route. They've got to get that part of the defense buttoned up, just like Dan Quinn said, or the Raiders are going to try to exploit the same weaknesses that Green Bay did. And I'll tell you right now, that 50-plus yarder to Tucker Kraft there early in the game against the Packers, the Raiders have a play that's almost just like it in their playbook. I saw it during film study. So believe me, they have it. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know when, but they're going to unveil it. If I were Pete Carroll, I'd run it play number one, man. I would run play number one. Let's see if you actually learned your lesson. Beyond the X's and O's for this Sunday, the season-ending injuries to key players force Adam Peters into some tough but critical roster decisions that are going to help shape the rest of the year. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The NFL season is here, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is making sure that you are ready for every kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers to FanDuel, you can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because I can get really specific with my bets based on this week's matchup against the Raiders. For example, the Raiders' run defense, right? I told you it's dominant in the interior, but has been vulnerable on the edges. Knowing that, I'm looking at player props for Commanders running backs, expecting the game plan to attack the perimeter. Which running back do you think maybe fits the bill for perimeter running more often than not? Maybe the prop is a good one to look at, expecting the game plan to go to the outside a little bit. Also, after seeing the defense struggle against the Packers tight ends last week, I know the Raiders are going to try to get Brock Bowers involved, so I'm building the same game parlay that includes at least a little bit of a day for him as well. It makes watching every snap just a little bit more exciting. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by going to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. The mailbag is going to shift from the field to the front office here as we wrap up this Mailbag Wednesday episode, where an unfortunate injury situation has created a fascinating roster building opportunity for Adam Peters, your general manager of the Washington Commanders. AP, not Adam Peters, but AP and Cam both want to know, if I'm Adam Peters with $30 million in cap space, what move do I make? And Cam is asking specifically about trying out kickers as well. So the new cap space, the increased cap space is due to the injuries to Austin Eckler and Dietrich Wise Jr. They're on IR. Their contracts no longer count against against the active roster, no longer count against the salary cap. So it creates a little bit more flexibility, close to $30 million, depending on the resource you use. I use Spot Track. It says like $29.4 million. So $30 million. If I'm Adam Peters, my immediate move, and he's already made some moves, like to be clear, right? Chase Edmonds to the practice squad, Chris Moore to the active roster, Jalen Holmes to the active roster, things like that. If I'm Adam Peters, my immediate move is to stand pat. Don't make a panic move. Don't make a knee-jerk move. First, see what you have in-house, then decide a course ahead. And of course, this is all hindering on my coach as well, right? Like, if I have a coach come to me, Daryl Tapp comes to me and says, hey, without Dietrich, we're up a creek. We need a new paddle. You need to go find us a paddle. And Dan Quinn says, hey, we need a new paddle. All right, let's go find my coaches a new paddle. But my gut says that they're like, look, we got moves. We got guys. We got talent. Look, we got this. If you go out there against the Raiders, let's find out what we got. If you don't have it, all right, then maybe we need to kick the tires on some players. At running back, DQ confirmed Chris Rodriguez Jr., again, going to be back in the fold. Team also has Chase Edmonds on the practice squad, who is a very capable veteran. Again, hasn't played meaningful football in over a year, so we got to see what that looks like if and when we get that chance. At defensive end, the team, Jalen Holmes on the practice or off the practice squad on the active roster, and then some other veterans. Preston Smith, former member of this franchise, worked out with the team on Tuesday. DeMarcus Walker is out there. Carl Lawson is out there. Again, I think you keep those numbers and names handy, but you see what happens first against the Las Vegas Raiders before you go making any big decisions. That's just personally what I think I would do. And I think that's what Adam Peters is probably going to do as well. As far as the kicker is concerned, look, DQ backed Matt Gay, right? He said, no, we're sticking with Matt. We got great confidence, end quote. That could change. The struggles continue. Zane Gonzalez is out there still. Austin Seibert's out there still. But for now, they're not making a change. Look, you guys know how I feel about it. I've since training camp, and he struggled a couple times in training camp in the preseason. I've said I thought they should have brought competition in for him. You know, it is what it is. We'll see what happens Sunday against Las Vegas. I love Matt Gay's leg, the length that he can get on the ball. I do. You just need the accuracy with it. Hats it to them, man. They think they got their guy, and they're going to go for it. We got another question from another insider, not football related. Why won't Carrie Underwood return my calls? Well, before we get into this, first of all, I got to state on the record that Carrie Underwood is married, and I do not condone calling and courting, as it were, a married woman. But because it is a mailbag question, and because I like to answer our mailbag questions, let's break this down. So what is Carrie Underwood's type? First of all, I would call it a grounded achiever type, guys who are top of their profession, but have their roots outside of the Hollywood bubble, right? She's not going after the Hollywood type per se. Her husband, Mike Fisher, NHL captain, before him, Tony Romo, starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Guys who understand the pressure of the spotlight because they've lived in the pressure of the spotlight and succeeded to various degrees. They also have a look to them, right? Tall, athletic, clean cut, all-American or all-Canadian, if that's a phrase. Most importantly, though, they also have some shared core values. Her husband, just like her, publicly devout, and they prioritize family needs over everything else. He's an outdoorsman from a small town in Canada. She's from Oklahoma, right? So it all kind of seems to tie together. So, insider, her type seems to be successful, confident, traditionally handsome, faith and family oriented, which means she's probably not interested in receiving calls from other guys while she's married, whose identity is rooted in professional sports. And I'm going to go on a limb and say that you don't meet one or more of those criteria that she's looking for in a husband, especially because she has a husband. That's the best answer I can give you. That's going to do it for today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions from the insider group. Next time on Locked On Commanders, your boy Q is going to be right here from Locked On Raiders. Crossover Thursday. Between now and then, however, a new episode of Commanders Squad will be dropping. We'll be going live. I will be in Ashburn. I'll be jumping into the live stream following practice tomorrow. Nick and Anthony Armstrong will be kicking that off for you at 1 p.m. Eastern if you want to tune in for that. And then, of course, I'll be there as well. In the meantime, if you've got questions for further mailbags, comments, or you just want to get as much inside information as I can possibly give you, including live text during games and press conferences, etc., go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today, and you too can find out why celebrities will not return your phone calls. The NFL season is finally here. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman Roland, gives you a shot of espresso every morning. Tony Wiggins brings you into the barbershop every afternoon, every Wednesday afternoon. I'm right there in there with him. So go check out Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers that see you, I appreciate you every single day. And I'm thanking you specifically today. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.